The Roman dead still covered the ground at Cannae when Hannibal turned his horse north and ordered the army toward Rome. Tens of thousands of men lay where the double envelopment had crushed them, and the consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus was among the fallen. It was August 216 BCE, and Hannibal Barca had just won the most complete battlefield victory of the ancient world. His Numidian cavalry commander, Maharbal, had pressed him to march at once, promising that within days he could dine on the capital. In our history, Hannibal hesitated, and Maharbal answered that the gods do not give all gifts to one man. Hannibal knew how to win a victory, but not how to use one. In this alternate timeline exploration, we examine what could have happened if he had listened, and why the real history unfolded differently. Here, the caution falls away. The cavalry leads. The column moves before Rome can comprehend what it has lost. But what the Senate did not yet understand, what would not become clear for weeks, was that the war was already over. The Carthaginian column left Apulia within days and pushed across the spine of Italy toward Latium. Roughly 400 kilometers separated Cannae from Rome, 2 weeks for an army moving with purpose, and Hannibal drove his men hard while his horsemen ranged ahead to seize crossings and strip the countryside of grain. News of the disaster outran him only barely. Roman messengers galloped the roads with word that both consular armies were destroyed, that 8 legions and their allied wings had been swallowed in a single afternoon. Behind them came the dust of the very army that had done it. As the column advanced, the first defectors appeared, herdsmen, then villages, then the agents of southern towns testing which way the wind now blew. Hannibal fed his army off the land he crossed, and every mile northward turned rumor into a visible, marching fact. The veterans of Iberia and Africa understood what their general had grasped at last. Speed was the weapon now, more than any sword. Rome learned that Hannibal was coming before it had finished counting its dead. The Senate convened in something close to terror, because the arithmetic was merciless. Both consular armies were gone. The surviving consul, Gaius Terentius Varro, was rallying a scattered remnant far to the south, too few and too broken to matter in time. The city that had always answered defeat by raising new legions suddenly had almost no trained men left to raise. In our history, Rome found just enough breathing room to enroll fresh troops, even arming slaves, and to refuse all terms. Here there was no breathing room. When Numidian scouts appeared within sight of the walls, the matrons were said to sweep the temple floors with their hair, begging the gods for deliverance. Quintus Fabius Maximus, the old delayer, whose caution had once preserved the state, counseled order and survival above all. But delay was a strategy for a Rome that still had armies in the field, that Rome no longer existed. As Hannibal invested the city, the structure that had made Rome strong began to come apart. Rome's power had never rested on its own population alone, but on a dense web of Latin and Italian allies, the Socii, who supplied the manpower that let the Republic absorb catastrophe after catastrophe. Now those allies did their own arithmetic. Capua, the great city of Campania and second only to Rome in wealth, threw open its gates to Carthage. Communities across Samnium, Lucania, and Bruttium declared for Hannibal, just as many had in our history, but here there was no surviving Roman field army to punish them, and so the defection did not stop. The wavering Latin colonies, which had held firm in reality out of loyalty and fear of Roman recovery, began to calculate differently. A power that cannot protect its friends cannot command them. With the legions gone and the capital encircled, loyalty to Rome became a wager few were willing to keep. And then came the question that would decide everything. Would Rome fight to the last, or bargain for its life? The Senate could neither break the siege nor summon an army to relieve it. And at last, the unthinkable was spoken aloud in the Curia. Envoys would go to Hannibal's camp. It was a decision that cut against everything Rome believed about itself, for this was the city that had once refused even to ransom its own captured soldiers rather than show weakness. Yet the men who chose negotiation were not fools and not cowards. Fabius and his allies understood that a Rome destroyed served no one, while a Rome that endured, even diminished, might one day rise again. Better the survival of the city, its temples, its senate, and its law than a sack that would erase all of it. The envoys passed through the Carthaginian lines under guard and came before the general who had beaten them at the Trebia, at Trasimene, and at Cannae. They came not to defy him now, but to learn his price. The terms travelled back across the sea to Carthage, where they had to pass the Samnites and the powerful council that truly governed the Punic state. There, the Barcid faction had long contended with rivals like Hanno the Great, who had questioned the cost and purpose of Hannibal's war from the beginning. But victory silences skeptics, and a peace dictated from the walls of Rome was a prize no council could refuse. The settlement they ratified was crafted to end Rome as a rival rather than merely to wound it. Rome surrendered its fleet and renounced its claims beyond Italy. It gave up its hold over the Italian allies, whose loyalty had been the true engine of its strength, leaving the Socii free to enter Carthage's orbit. The Republic survived as a city and a name, but it was reduced to one power among many in an order led from Carthage. The instrument that had let Rome conquer the Mediterranean was deliberately dismantled. With no Roman challenger left at sea, the Mediterranean reorganized itself around Carthage. The Punic state had always been a maritime and commercial power, its wealth drawn from trade, from the grain and harbors of North Africa, and from the silver of Iberia. Now that commercial genius operated without a military rival. Carthaginian treaties and colonies knit Iberia, Sicily, North Africa, and much of Italy into a single trading network whose terms were set in the Punic world. Philip V of Macedon, who had allied with Hannibal, found himself partner to the dominant power of the West rather than a gambler on the losing side, and Syracuse's tilt toward Carthage was rewarded rather than crushed. The roads that Rome would have built were never laid. The sea lanes that Carthage already mastered became the arteries of the age. Where Roman legions would have marched, Punic ships sailed, carrying goods and the customs that followed them. Over generations, the organizing culture of the ancient West became Carthaginian rather than Latin. The change came slowly, in the ordinary way that real change comes, through markets, ledgers, harbor towns, and the children of merchants who learned the language of the men they traded with. The administrative Latin that in our world spread across half a continent was here a provincial tongue, spoken in one diminished city and its hinterland. In its place rose the inheritance of Phoenician seafarers carried west by Carthage, its gods, its commerce, its way of binding distant places through trade rather than conquest. The West that emerged was not poorer for it, only different, a Mediterranean shaped by Punic merchants and Phoenician memory instead of Roman law and the legion. None of this was destiny. It turned on a single afternoon in Apulia on a general who, just this once, chose to use the victory he had won. Rome had survived defeat before because it always had one more army to raise. The lesson of this timeline is quieter and harder. Strength built on others' loyalty lasts exactly as long as the power to protect them, and at Cannae, in this telling, that power was already gone before the dead were buried.